You'd think owning 5 acres at the edge of a town would give a man some peace. But nope, HOA found a way to slither in. I'm Marcus Stenley. Bought this property 3 years ago, and it came with a barn that's older than me but solid as a rock. I fixed it up myself, replaced the doors, reinforced the roof, even wired in lights. It's mine. So when I saw a pearl white Lexus parked inside it Friday morning, I just about flipped. It wasn't just any Lexus. It had that stupid HOA president decal slapped on the back window like it meant something. And I already knew whose it was, Tiffany Ralston, middle-aged terror in a pantsuit. She ran the Willow Creek HOA like it was a dictatorship, complete with surprise inspections and fines for unsightly patriotism, which apparently meant my American flag was too faded last July. She lived 2 blocks down, in a house that looked like it had been vacuum sealed in beige. I stormed over to the barn, yanked the doors open wider, and there it sat, her car, parked like she owned the place. I stared at it for a second, trying to wrap my head around what she was thinking. Then I turned around, and there she was, standing at the edge of my gravel driveway with her clipboard of doom. "Morning, Marcus," she chirped like we were pals. "I had to move my car out of the street. The landscapers are reseeding the front lawn today, and your barn was open. Figured you wouldn't mind." "You figured I'd be fine with you trespassing?" I asked, stepping toward her. She just blinked at me, all innocent. "Oh, please, it's not trespassing. We're all part of the same community. What's mine is yours and vice versa." "That isn't how property law works, Tiffany," I said. "This barn is on my private land, not HOA-maintained grounds." She waved her clipboard like it was a sacred text. "Well, under Section 5, Paragraph 3 of the HOA Charter, any unutilized structure can be temporarily repurposed for community benefit." I stared at her. That paragraph refers to empty sheds on common land, not someone's personal barn. "Are you insane?" She gave this tight, condescending smile. "If you're going to be difficult, I can always file a non-compliance report. Your fence is still 2 inches too high on the west side." That was it. I didn't say another word. Just turned around, walked back to the barn, grabbed the heavy-duty padlock I kept by the door and clicked it shut. She gasped. "Marcus, you can't lock my vehicle in there." "I didn't lock your vehicle in," I said, walking back to my truck. "I locked my barn. Whatever's inside it is none of my business now. You're being childish," I climbed into my truck, "and you're trespassing. I'm heading to my brother's cabin for the weekend. Cell service is spotty, so don't hold your breath waiting for a rescue." Her mouth flapped, but I revved the engine and pulled out before she could spit another word. I glanced in the rearview mirror just in time to see her stomping back toward her Lexus, yanking on the locked barn doors like she was trying to rip them off. I smiled. She'd messed with the wrong guy. That barn was staying shut until Monday. By the time I pulled back into town late Sunday night, the rain had just started, the kind that taps on your windshield like it's trying to get your attention. I rolled through the neighborhood slowly, headlights sweeping across rows of sterile houses and identically trimmed hedges. My place, tucked at the edge of a wooded lot, looked like it belonged on another planet compared to the rest of Willow Creek. I parked in front of the house and immediately noticed the barn lock was gone, not broken, gone. That padlock was industrial grade, the kind you'd need bolt cutters to get through. I walked up, knelt to examine the latch, and found the faint glint of fresh metal shavings on the ground. Someone had cut it clean. The doors stood slightly ajar, creaking in the breeze. Inside, the Lexus was gone. But in its place, a folded notice sat on my workbench. I didn't even have to open it to know who it was from. Still, I unfolded it because I needed specifics. Unauthorized use of structure for private storage. Immediate compliance demanded. $250 fine issued. Further violations will result in legal action. Willow Creek HOA Compliance Office. I stared at the paper for a long time, letting the rain soak through my jacket. She'd really done it. Cut my lock, took her car, and had the gall to fine me for her own stunt. I walked back into the house, dripping, and pulled out the small black case I kept in the hall closet. Not a gun. A GoPro. I'd hardwired 3 of them outside after my shed was mysteriously reorganized last fall. I'd kept the footage rolling to catch raccoons. Turns out I'd been preparing for a different kind of vermin. I popped the SD card into my laptop and fast-forwarded to Saturday morning. Sure enough, at 11:42, Tiffany marched down my gravel path with a man in tow. Probably her cousin from the landscaping company she kept hiring for HOA grounds. He carried bolt cutters. She had an umbrella and that same clipboard. They didn't even try to hide it. He snapped the lock, she opened the doors, and they both stepped inside. 10 minutes later, her Lexus rolled out like it was nothing. They left the doors hanging open, that right there. Felony trespass and destruction of private property. I didn't bother with emails. I drove straight to the county sheriff's office the next morning. Deputy Collins, a man with a mustache that probably had its own zip code, sat behind the desk, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. "She cut your lock?" he asked, watching the footage on my screen. "Sure did. That's her HOA badge and all. Did you give her permission?" "No." I locked her car in there Friday after she parked without asking. Figured she could think about it for a couple days. He chuckled. "Petty but legal." I thought so. He leaned back in his chair, scratched his chin. "Cutting through a padlock to retrieve property from someone else's structure. That's not a gray area. That's straight-up criminal damage. You want to press charges? If I didn't, I wouldn't be here." He nodded and started typing. "We'll need a formal statement. And I'll swing by with one of the techs to get a copy of that footage." I left the station an hour later with a case number and a printed copy of the complaint. I wasn't smiling, not exactly, but something close. This wasn't just about a car anymore. Tiffany had gotten real comfortable acting like the HOA charter made her queen of the subdivision. Time to remind her the county didn't answer to her clipboard. By the time I got back home, a new notice had been taped to my front door. This one was a full page printed in bold font like she thought it might scare me. Failure to maintain structure security. Open doors attract potential liability. Fine, $400. I didn't even touch it. Just snapped a photo and sent it to Deputy Collins. He called me 10 minutes later. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered after reading it. "She's doubling down. And she left the doors open herself. She's digging her own hole. We'll bring this to the township attorney." Might be bigger than just trespass. I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but I was more than willing to find out. The next afternoon, as I was tightening new hinges on the barn doors, a silver city vehicle pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a woman in a tailored blazer, Angela Voss, Township Legal Counsel. I'd seen her once at a public zoning meeting where she'd chewed through a developer's proposal like it was breakfast. "Mr. Stenley," she said, extending a hand. "Mind if I take a look at the footage?" I showed her everything: the lock cutting, the car retrieval, Tiffany's clipboard theatrics. Angela watched silently, taking notes with a fountain pen. When the video ended, she closed her notebook. "That's enough to open a formal investigation into abuse of authority," she said. HOAs are private entities, but when they start impersonating legal authority or tampering with private property, they cross a line. What happens next? We'll notify the HOA board and request their internal records for the past 90 days. If we find a pattern, this won't stop with trespassing charges. The next 3 days were quiet, too quiet, no notices, no surprise inspections. Tiffany's house had its curtains drawn tight and her Lexus didn't move. On Friday, Deputy Collins called again. "You might want to come down to the station." When I arrived, he handed me a file. Inside were scanned copies of HOA expenditure reports that the township had pulled for the investigation. "Take a look at this," he said. Under community beautification projects, there were repeated payments to Ralston Landscaping, Tiffany's brother's company. Same address, same tax ID. Over $20,000 for lawn assessments, fence consultations, and shade optimization. She's been funneling HOA funds to her own family, I said. Looks that way. Angela Voss stepped into the room and added, and issuing fines to homeowners who refused their services. That's racketeering under state law. I leaned back in the chair. So what now? We're filing for a temporary injunction against the HOA. No fines, no enforcement until this is resolved. The following Monday, every single resident of Willow Creek got a letter from the township. It explained that all HOA enforcement activity was suspended pending investigation. It listed Tiffany by name, and it included a hotline number for residents to report any interactions they'd had involving suspicious fees or forced services. By Wednesday, that hotline had over 60 calls. Turns out Tiffany had fined a veteran down the street for flying a POW flag. She'd harassed a nurse for parking a work van in her own driveway, and she'd threatened to foreclose on a retiree's home over a bird feeder that attracted wildlife. The whole neighborhood was done letting it slide. I walked outside Thursday morning to find a row of signs lining the road, each one handmade, each one different. HOA doesn't own us. Free the feeder, Ralston resign, and the best one stuck right in front of my barn read, this structure is protected by petty vengeance and the law. I didn't put it there, but I left it up. Friday morning arrived with a knock that echoed through the house like a gavel. I opened the door and found Deputy Collins standing there, hat in hand, eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. Got a minute, Marcus? I stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen. He walked in without a word, set a manila folder on the table and flipped it open. Do you recognize this? He asked, pointing to a grainy photocopy of a receipt. I leaned in. It listed a payment just shy of $5,000 to something called Willow Creek Residential Outreach Initiative. The address belonged to an empty lot half a mile outside of town. Never heard of it. Neither had we. But Tiffany authorized this payment last month. Labeled it a community wellness grant. I raised an eyebrow. Wellness, he nodded slowly. And here's where it gets worse. Turns out that lot was recently purchased under her daughter's name. Cash deal, no mortgage. I sat down heavily. You're saying she's been siphoning HOA funds using fake initiatives and routing the money to family. That's what it looks like, he said. But that's not all. He pulled out another sheet, a list of wire transfers, dozens of them. Small amounts, nothing over $6,000, but all within the last year. Each traced back to different shell companies, most registered out of state. All linked to the HOA treasury account. Angela Voss arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a briefcase and a look that could peel paint. We've got probable cause for embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of fiduciary authority, she said as she unpacked a laptop. We're coordinating with the State Attorney General's office. If we can prove any of this money crossed state lines, it becomes a federal case. I stayed quiet, watching as she pulled up more documents. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, opening tax records, tracing paper trails, cross-referencing names. It was like watching someone disarm a bomb. Tiffany's daughter listed a company as her employer on her last mortgage filing, Angela said. Same company that the HOA paid for mailing services last quarter, but it doesn't actually exist. No employees, no office, no tax filings. So she created a fake business and paid it with HOA funds. Exactly, and she wasn't even subtle about it. She filed it under her maiden name. I shook my head, trying to grasp the scale of what was unfolding. What happens now? We've requested a forensic audit from the state, she said. And this morning, the district court approved a temporary freeze on all HOA-controlled accounts. Tiffany won't be touching another dime until this is finished. That afternoon, unmarked vehicles roamed Willow Creek like sharks in a koi pond. State investigators in plain clothes knocked on doors, collecting statements, requesting digital files, and reviewing HOA meeting minutes. Some residents watched nervously from their windows. Others came outside, eager to cooperate. I stayed out of the way until a woman I'd never seen before approached me on the sidewalk. Late 30s, neat ponytail, blazer that looked government-issued. "You Marcus Stenley," depends who's asking. She held out a badge. "Agent Keller, Financial Crimes Division. Can we speak inside?" Inside, she wasted no time. "We've confirmed at least 9 separate entities tied to the HOA's operating account," she said, laying out a series of interconnected diagrams. "All appear to be shell companies used to funnel funds, and that barn incident, that was the mistake that cracked this whole thing open." I blinked. "Because I locked her car in. Because it triggered a paper trail," she said. "She filed a formal complaint to justify cutting your lock. That complaint referenced a policy that was never ratified." From there, we started digging. She handed me a document with my name on it, an internal HOA memo, unsigned, dated 3 days before the barn incident. It listed my property as a potential community resource and proposed a temporary reassignment of access. I'd never seen it before. "They planned it," I said, "before she even parked the car. Looks that way." By dusk, word spread that Tiffany had been taken in for questioning. Not arrested yet, but escorted from her home by state agents while her husband watched from the porch, arms crossed, saying nothing. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer as neighbors wandered over one by one. First came Howard, the retired Navy pilot with more stories than teeth. Then Ellie, the nurse who'd been fined for her van. Then the Hendersons, who'd almost sold their house after Tiffany threatened legal action over their rose bushes. We sat in lawn chairs, ringed by citronella candles, and shared outrage. Nobody needed to say much. We all understood something had shifted. On Sunday, a meeting was called not by the HOA, but by the residents themselves. We met in the community park, under the old oak tree that had somehow escaped Tiffany's obsession with symmetry. Angela and Agent Keller attended. So did Deputy Collins, along with a representative from the state auditor's office. They stood before the group, laid out the findings, and answered questions. "How much money are we talking?" someone asked. "Over $100,000 in misappropriated funds," Keller replied. "Possibly more, depending on what the audit turns up." "Can we dissolve the HOA?" Ellie asked. Angela answered that one. "Yes, but it requires a supermajority vote of property owners. We'll help you navigate the process if that's what the community wants." They took a vote right then and there. Dozens of hands shot up. The people had spoken. The next morning, a petition circulated. Within 48 hours, enough signatures were collected to begin the dissolution process. Legal proceedings were set in motion. The HOA, once a tool of control and intimidation, was now a hollow shell awaiting demolition. Tiffany's home sat quiet. No cars in the driveway, no movement behind the windows. Rumor had it she'd left town. Her husband was still around, but nobody saw him outside anymore. A week later, a letter arrived from the district court. It confirmed formal charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, and criminal misappropriation of funds. Tiffany Ralston was facing serious prison time. I kept the letter on my fridge for a while, not out of pride, but as a reminder. Power left unchecked turns people into tyrants, but community, that's what holds the line. I went out to the barn that evening and finally removed the heavy padlock. Not because I needed to, but because the message had already been sent. She thought she could take whatever she wanted. She didn't count on the town pushing back, and she sure didn't count on me. The day we reached quorum for dissolving the HOA, the township clerk personally dropped off the confirmation papers. She didn't say much, just handed over the envelope with a nod like she had 100 other things to do, but I could tell she'd been rooting for us. No fanfare, no speeches. Just a quiet end to a loud problem, but that wasn't the final chapter. Not yet. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Angela Voss. She'd been coordinating with the state attorney general's office, and now she had something she wanted to show me in person. She didn't give details over the line, just said, "You'll want to see this for yourself." She met me at the county courthouse, 3rd floor, in a room that smelled like old file boxes and cheap coffee. She had a laptop open on the table, a flash drive sticking out of the side like a dagger. "Security footage," she said. "From the HOA's old office. We subpoenaed it after the audit reports came back." I leaned in as she hit play. The footage was grainy, time-stamped from 4 months back. It showed Tiffany and a man I didn't recognize, tall, wore a navy blazer and bright red tie like someone who practiced his smile in front of a mirror. They stood by a shredder. Angela paused the video. "That man's name is Curtis Dre," she said. "He served as HOA legal counsel. Or at least that's what he called himself. Turns out he's not licensed to practice law in this state, never was." She resumed the video. Tiffany handed Curtis a thick folder. He flipped through it, nodded, and began feeding pages through the shredder, one after another. No hesitation. "Those were financial records," Angela said. "From the missing quarter in last year's audit, the ones we couldn't trace." I watched silently as the last sheet disappeared into the blades. Angela pulled out a second flash drive. "This one's worse." The next video was from a motion-activated camera inside Dre's office. It wasn't part of the HOA system, someone else had installed it. The video showed him opening a drawer, pulling out a stack of blank HOA citations, and signing them with a mechanical stamp. Not his signature. Tiffany's. Angela didn't say anything. She didn't need to. "They were fabricating fines," I said. "More than that," she replied. "They added extra charges to properties that were behind on dues, then bundled those debts into private liens. They sold to a collections firm that Dre owned under a different name. He was buying the debt cheap, filing foreclosure threats, and flipping the liens for profit." I stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle behind my ribs. "That's not just unethical," I said. "That's criminal fraud. We've filed charges for wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. State's pursuing restitution. The AG's office is also looking into whether any homes were wrongfully foreclosed on because of this." "Were they?" She nodded. "3 properties, one still vacant." "I want to buy it," I said without thinking. Angela blinked. "Excuse me, that vacant property." "I want to buy it, fix it up, sell it back to the family that lost it. No profit, just writing the ledger." She studied me for a moment, then gave a slow, approving nod. "I'll make a call." The next week, I met the original owner of the house, a woman named Patricia Hargrove. Widowed, early 60s, soft voice that barely carried above the wind. She'd lost her husband to a heart attack 2 years ago, and the HOA had slapped her with nearly $5,000 in bogus fees right after. Then came the lien. Then the threats. "I didn't have the strength to fight them," she said, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea I'd offered her. "I thought maybe I was the one who'd done something wrong." "You didn't," I said. "We've got the proof now. I can get your house back. If you still want it." She looked at me like I'd offered her a miracle. Then, without a word, she reached across the table and gripped my hand. It took 2 weeks and a mountain of red tape, but we got her the deed. I covered the closing costs myself. The township waived the transfer taxes. She moved back in the following month. That wasn't the only victory. The former board members, 7 of them, were each fined by the state for dereliction of duty. 2 had prior complaints on file from other HOAs they'd served on. They were barred from holding administrative positions in any community organization for 10 years. Curtis Dre. He'd been arrested in a different county while trying to set up a new shell company. Possession of forged documents, intent to defraud, and obstruction of justice. Last I heard, he was awaiting trial. As for Tiffany, she was indicted on 9 counts. She drained over $120,000 from the HOA over 2 years, all while threatening residents with fabricated citations and legal jargon. The judge denied bail, citing risk of flight and witness tampering. Her trial was scheduled for the fall. I received a subpoena to testify. Angela said I'd be the closing arrow, not the first shot. My footage, my complaint, and that ridiculous barn stunt had triggered the whole domino effect. She told me the state was building a case so airtight, not even Tiffany's expensive out-of-town lawyer could wiggle through it. The barn itself became a quiet symbol. I didn't advertise it, didn't turn it into a shrine, but folks started asking if they could use it for real things. A neighbor wanted to host a kids' art class in the spring. Another asked if he could store wood during the winter. I made them sign little agreements, nothing fancy, just enough to make it clear. We respected each other's space now. One Saturday, I came home to find a hand-carved sign hanging above the barn doors. It read, "No trespassers, no tyrants, community welcome." No one claimed it, but I left it up. The town council passed a new ordinance 3 months later. Any HOA formed in the county had to register with the township clerk, submit quarterly financials, and host publicly accessible meetings with recorded minutes. Angela helped draft the language. I helped review it. It passed unanimously. People started planting again. Hanging flags. Parking in their own driveways without second-guessing themselves. One neighbor finally let his kid paint a mural on their fence, bright colors, abstract shapes, nothing that would have survived the old regime. It stayed up. No one complained. The day I went to the courthouse to testify, I wore jeans and boots. Angela gave me a look but didn't say anything. When I took the stand, I told the truth, every piece of it. From the day Tiffany parked in my barn to the moment the community reclaimed its voice. The jury listened. Some leaned forward. Others scribbled notes. One woman nodded just once when I described locking the barn and driving away. It didn't take long. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed 6 weeks later. 5 years minimum with restitution ordered for all affected homeowners. Tiffany didn't speak at the hearing. She just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, while the judge laid out the consequences like bricks. Afterward, I walked out of the courthouse into late afternoon sunlight. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and diesel exhaust, real life still moving forward. I didn't feel triumphant. Just settled. Like the last piece of something broken had been fit back where it belonged. One of my neighbors passed me on the sidewalk and tipped his ball cap. "Heard about the mural," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You like it? Don't matter, ain't my fence." And that, I thought, was the whole point. I headed home. When I reached the barn, I tapped the new sign twice with my knuckles, just a quiet thank you. Then I pulled the doors open, rolled out my old tool chest, and got back to building something that'd last.